against you. Okay? No, this is an information by the judge.
Okay.
Va bene? Perfetto.
Siti, stand up.
Preferisce essere in piedi davanti alla corte.
Sì. Prego, può procedere.
Okay.
Buongiorno signora Presidente e signori della Corte di Assise. I'm not in a suitable physical and psychological condition to be able to speak in front of you for a long time. The thought, the pain of what happened, and the nervous strain I feel are devastating. But I will try my best to explain to you my experience because I know it is important. I told my side of the story right away, as soon as I was arrested, even before speaking to a lawyer. This is why I thought it was better for you to have my statements available, because they were made even before I knew many details of that terrible night. And this shows that I've always said the truth. However, I would like you judges to hear what happened from my perspective. This is why I'm making these statements now. I've been taking notes in my cell for the past year, so I'd remember all the important and particular things to say to you. It's difficult for me to explain my entire life story. My mother and multiple psychiatrists have spoken about it, and you probably understand enough about it, so I would not like to take more time to explain my whole life in depth. However, I can say with certainty that many things about me have changed after the events of July 26th, but I still can't get away from the constant feelings of anxiety, panic attacks, depression, and grief. Still, it's hard for me to find the courage to express these feelings in public. I already said a lot about the facts of which I'm accused in my interview that took place a few hours after the incident. Apart from a few details, which in any case I wasn't asked, I confirm everything that I said then. I also confirm what I said to my family when they visited me in prison, although I understand that the translation into Italian was not easy. I'm going to try and reconstruct some points. I don't know if this will help me or not, but I'm going to be honest. After listening to all these hearings, I've realized that it's difficult to believe a person in my position. But what I'm telling you today is the truth, just as I spoke the truth at the time. During the days before I came to Europe, I was paralyzed in my bed with depression. I'd stay there the whole day, crying, unable to sleep, eat, or communicate with any friends or family. I came to Europe because I needed to change my life and leave the past behind. I knew that if I didn't do anything, I would end up killing myself. I needed to start over. That period of my life was very dark, and at the time, I felt crushed by my psychiatric problems, and I felt overall worthless. Unfortunately, the change I wanted did not happen. Since my first days in Germany, I still felt lonely and depressed, but I'd rather not talk about it, because I failed. And even if I did talk about it, you might think that I'm trying to find some excuse. In Germany, I started smoking marijuana again. It was a powerful and continuous addiction, which at the time seemed to be the only thing to stop my fears and calm me down. I hadn't planned on going to Italy during this trip. My parents love this country. It's where they went on their honeymoon. But it's also where a dramatic incident happened to my mother. I understood that the court did not allow my attorneys, Roberto and Renato, to ask questions on this episode. But what happened to my mom in Rome, and the fact that, as a girl, she herself had been a victim of sexual violence in the United States. These are events that we've discussed many times in our family. Me and my sister, Alessandra, who was given the Italian form of the name precisely because my parents love Italy, were greatly disturbed by those events. These are family stories that always bothered me, along with other events in my personal life, some of which have been partially described in this trial, and others that have not been spoken about at all. Another thing that wasn't mentioned are the various voluntary activities I've done in my life, including coaching football for young children and supervising a summer camp in my neighborhood. To continue the story of my trip to Italy, as others have stated, the idea of coming to Italy came after having exchanged messages with my friend Gabe. It's true that he wasn't a very close friend. We had only attended school together for a few years, but he was still a friend. And since my return flight to the U.S. departed from Barcelona, I thought it'd be good to spend a few days in Rome.
Doveva tornare, sì.
With someone I know. Because like before, my loneliness was making life difficult. My mother, who had a discount voucher for the La Meridian Hotel, originally booked a room for the night between the 24th and the 25th of July. But it was I who later on the morning of July 25th unfortunately asked the reception to extend the reservation for another night. In the afternoon of July 25th, my mom from the United States changed my flight from Rome to
Ha
Barcelona
cambiato il mio volo da Roma a Barcellona
for the evening of July 26th. From Barcelona, I would have had to take another flight to return home. I arrived at the hotel in Rome on the morning of July 24th. I checked in at the front desk, then met Gabe. Then we bought a few things and toured around the beautiful city. I believe there are some photos from that afternoon. On the evening of July 25th, I was still feeling sad and depressed, so I stupidly drank some beers, took a few shots, and took some Xanax pills, thinking that these substances would make me feel better. This is why, along with the advice of an American friend who'd been to Rome, me and Gabe decided to go to Trastevere to look for some cocaine. At the time, I was trying to quit cocaine, but I thought, regretfully, that it would be something to help us enjoy the night. And from past experience, I thought the effect of the drug would make us feel better and give us some energy to walk around and go to bars and clubs. I don't remember exactly the time, but it was late in the night when we reached a square in Trastevere. This is where Gabe asked around to find someone who knew where we could get some cocaine. I understood that a man in the square was immediately referred to as a known drug dealer. I can't say more than this because I didn't speak Italian and don't know exactly what arrangements had been made. I followed Gabe thinking we could get the cocaine we wanted from that man. We went to an ATM to withdraw some money. From what I understood, Brugitelli, whose name I learned from my lawyers, introduced himself as Sergio. He looked like a bum or drug dealer and assured Gabe that he dealt cocaine. He said we had to walk a little further to meet the person who would give it to us. So me and Gabe walked with Sergio through narrow alleys in Trastevere until we reached a larger square. It had trees and stone benches and looked like a park. We sat down, and after a while, Sergio asked Gabe to follow him. They were supposed to cross the street and meet the person who had the cocaine. I was asked to stay by the bench and watch Sergio's backpack and bicycle. After a few minutes, I don't remember exactly how long, I saw Gabe running back. He told me he got played and robbed, and that Sergio and his contact had taken the money without giving him any cocaine. We waited for a few minutes, and then we thought, the idea was actually mine, that since we'd been robbed, it would be fair to take the dealer's backpack. And so we took it and ran away towards the river, and reached a square with a monument. From there we took a taxi back to the hotel. I would like to specify that to me, taking the backpack was a spontaneous action, something just out of frustration for Gabe being robbed. There was never any intention or thought of using the backpack to get money back. Obviously, I understand that it was wrong to take it, but I acted compulsively with the idea that it was some type of compensation for the 80 euros that were stolen from Gabe. I'd like to point out that what I understood from Gabe's story is that he was robbed by a group of people. I remember he said around 12 people, and that this group gave him the impression that they wanted him to believe they were cops. But in reality, they were acting very strange and aggressive, like criminals. Essentially, those people had given him the impression that they prepared this type of trap to scam people and take money. In the taxi, we looked in the backpack and saw there was a phone and other normal things inside. Gabe took the phone and started calling. I heard him speaking Italian, which I couldn't understand. Then soon after, we arrived at the hotel. I was very tired when we got there and wanted to go to sleep. I texted my girlfriend Christina, making fun of Gabe for what had happened. In my head at that moment, the whole story had ended. The night was over. Gabe was still speaking on the phone in Italian, but I wasn't interested. I then learned, but only after the altercation of that night, that Sergio at one point had proposed giving back 100 euros and a gram of cocaine, instead of only 80 euros. As I also stated during my interview, when we got back from Trastevere, I immediately laid down in bed from exhaustion. I was very tired and didn't want to go out. While I was texting Christina, I could still hear Gabe speaking in Italian, and at some point he left the room. He left the room. He returned after a few minutes and told me he'd been looking for a place to meet Sergio. This was because he didn't trust him at all and was afraid Sergio would show up with other people, like with the guy in Trastevere or some of the other guys who had stolen his money. Gabe thought it was likely they would try to trick him again and not return the money. As I said during my interview, I told him not to go out and made no suggestions at all. However, Gabe returned and shortly after told me that he was going to go alone to meet Sergio and get the money. But he didn't go into detail. He wore the backpack we had taken over his shoulder and looked calm. As I said, I didn't want to leave the hotel, and for a moment, just as he was about to leave, I told him I was okay with him going alone. But then, I felt that letting him go alone was wrong of me and cowardly. I couldn't do that, so that's why I went with him. We wore our sweatshirts and had our hoods on from time to time. We did this for one reason. If Sergio were to arrive with his partners, Pompey and
Pompei e Tamer,
whose names I learned from the court records, or anybody else,
o chiunque altro,
they probably wouldn't have recognized us, and we could have just left. As we were leaving the room, I foolishly put the knife I'd brought from America in my sweatshirt pocket. I'll say this now, because I heard this question was asked. It was my decision, and I don't know if Gabe saw me carrying the knife. He was at the door of the room, and I don't know if he saw what I was doing. During this trial, I understood it was asked, with good reason, as to why I'd brought a knife, both the reason for which I'd brought it from the United States, as well as why, regretfully, I had it on me that night. First of all,
prima di tutto,
I'd like to explain that this knife, like many other similar ones, is a replica of an old military knife with different and low-grade materials. Make no mistake, I'm not saying they aren't dangerous, but only explaining you can buy them online or in sporting goods stores like Big Five, where I bought mine. I believe my lawyers deposited a photo of a store window, which I know my mother sent. I often used to go camping or fishing in natural areas near San Francisco, and that was the original reason for which I bought it. Foolishly, I felt safer with that knife. I don't know if this has to do with any of my fears, but the idea of at least having a knife to defend myself, even if I was alone, was reassuring. When I went out with Gabe, I took it with me, but I didn't think I'd have to use it. It gave me a sense of protection, since I had that feeling of fear and anxiety combined with the knowledge that we were about
insieme alla conoscenza,
that we were about to meet a drug dealer who could show up with his friends.
che poteva comparire con I suoi amici.
Moreover, I was in a foreign country that was completely unfamiliar to me and whose language I could not understand. I can understand that in a trial, and after what had happened, many arguments can be found against me. But what I'm saying is the truth. I had no aggressive intention. It was a foolish caution dictated by my fears, by the fact that in the U.S., going around with a knife is not strange, and also by a feeling of apprehension, which is understandable, given what had happened earlier in Trastevere. At that moment, I didn't have the slightest idea of what kind of people Sergio or his friends were, and neither did Gabe. To me, they were drug-dealing criminals, and therefore potentially dangerous. Going back to the story, when we left the building of the hotel, Gabe left the backpack in a bush nearby. We stopped for a few minutes by a water fountain. When we hid behind the parked cars, this was because we saw a car passing, and were under the impression that Sergio was arriving with other drug dealers to the meeting place which Gabe had set up, which I later learned to be Via Belli. Meanwhile, Gabe continued talking on the phone in Italian, and at one point he asked me to follow him towards the bank, which I did. We both stood near the pharmacy, not in front of the entrance of the pharmacy, nor on the sidewalk, but in the middle of the street. As Gabe stated, we were more or less on the pedestrian crossing of Via Pietro Cosa.
Di via Pietro Cossa.
I know the name of the street from the trial. At one point, we heard some footsteps. The street was quiet, and we saw two strangers walking. They arrived from the side of the street where the bank was. I thought they were tourists, or just ordinary people, even though they looked shady. In fact, Gabe and I mentioned to each other that they looked strange. But since I saw them talking with each other in front of the bank, I wasn't worried. I thought they could be two friends going home from a bar. In any case, Sergio wasn't with them, and it was likely that they had nothing to do with him or the reason for which we were there. At a certain point, well before the pedestrian crossing of Via Cesi,
Di via Cesi,
they started to cross the street diagonally. They were almost ignoring us, and were walking parallel to the sidewalk of the pharmacy. They went past the point where we were standing. I later figured out that they wanted us to believe they were heading in another direction so they wouldn't scare us off.
Successivamente
I later
ho
figured out.
immaginato, sì.
Okay. Then, in the blink of an eye, they turned around and rushed us without saying a single word. The larger of the two was truly a mountain of a man. He tackled me to the ground and put all his weight on top of me. I was lying with my back on the asphalt, more or less towards the center of the intersection between Via Cesi and Via Costa.
E via Cossa.
I remember little of the next few moments, except for the feelings of shock and terror. I do remember, however, that I could feel his hands first on my chest and then on my neck with pressure, as if he was trying to strangle or choke me as I was struggling to free myself. At this stage, I panicked and believed he wanted to kill me. As soon as I felt his hand squeezing my neck, I instinctively pulled out my knife and hit him a few times in an effort to get him off me. All this lasted a few seconds. I couldn't think of anything. I was just terrified. I also had the impression he was reaching for something since he moved his other arm towards his pants.
He was reaching?
He was reaching for something since he moved his other arm.
Pantaloni, sì.
After talking with my lawyers, I found out that he didn't have any weapons with him. And in any case, I didn't see any.
After several.
Yeah. After several hits, he grabbed my hand, the one that I was holding the knife with, and tried to turn it against me. And so, I don't know how, but I reflexively switched hands and hit him again on his side. I can't recall all the details of what else happened. I didn't even have the time to think, because it all happened so fast.
Perché tutto è successo così velocemente.
My only intention was to free myself from the weight of that person and run away, which I did when he finally let go. I ran away fast and saw Gabe was running too, so we headed to the hotel. I want to point out, and this is what I immediately told both the police who questioned me without an attorney, as well as those who officially interrogated.
Senza un avvocato?
As well as those who officially interrogated me, that when those men approached, they immediately attacked us, like they wanted to rob or hurt us. Without saying a word.
To rob?
Rob or hurt. Rob. Without saying a word and without showing any ID or any other object.
O alcun altro oggetto?
They didn't even say policia, which sounds like the English word police. I also never heard the word carabinieri, which I wouldn't have understood in any case. I only learned the meaning of carabinieri after I was arrested.
Scusi?
Uh,
It only learned?
I only learned the meaning of carabinieri only after I was arrested.
Soltanto dopo che sono stato arrestato.
I heard Mr. Variale say, during the trial, that he heard his colleagues say, "Enough, carabinieri."
Abbastanza, carabinieri. Enough?
Basta, come basta?
Ok, basta, basta. Carabinieri. Stop.
Okay. When the altercation started. As far as I remember, I didn't hear a single word. Only a muffled cry of pain, when regretfully, I hit the man who I later learned was a police officer. When I returned to the hotel, I was still under the impression that I'd been attacked by a thug. It was only when I was arrested and taken to the police station and interrogated for several hours that someone told me I had killed a cop. And I was shocked and confused, because in America, police officers, who also of course make mistakes,
Ovviamente anche commettono
serious mistakes,
dei grandi errori,
behave very differently. Officers announce themselves and draw their weapons if someone refuses to be identified. Of course, I realized I had hurt someone. I honestly did not think I had killed him. We were both scared and shocked by what had happened, especially me, since I used the knife. I didn't know what to think. I couldn't understand what had happened. I didn't even think about running away. I immediately took more Xanax and other pills to calm me down. Gabe asked me questions, but I was stunned and my mind was racing. I just explained to him that the guy was going to kill me and that I had to defend myself. I heard someone during the trial ask why we didn't call the police or do something else. I think we were both completely paralyzed with fear. Besides, I had a feeling sooner or later they'd find me, and I didn't think about running away. I also wasn't entirely sure that there would be a thorough investigation, considering those men were drug dealers. I didn't even know if those who attacked us were connected with the events of Brigitelli. It definitely never occurred to me that I was facing an officer. Not only because those men didn't say or show anything verifying that they were police, but also because I never thought that a drug dealer could call the police. This does not happen in America. A few minutes after the incident, I called my girlfriend Christina. The specific time is shown in the phone. It was a short call, and I explained little of what had happened. I mainly told her we were attacked by thugs. After the call, we exchanged some text messages. After that, I was so stressed and exhausted that I fell asleep with the Xanax and didn't wake up until the police raid the next morning. As I said, I never tried to run away. Even though I thought I could be accused of having injured a person, I didn't think that he was dead. Later, that morning, they knocked on the door, and I knew it was the police. So I opened the door and didn't put up any resistance. I believed I could explain. I was taken to the police station. I felt dazed and confused and didn't understand what was going on. When I entered, I was in a courtyard where dozens of people were shouting at me and spitting on me. I spent many hours there exhausted and barely able to stay awake. I was certainly not treated correctly there. But today I admit that I can understand the colleagues of Mr. Cerciello. A friend of theirs had just died, and the reactions are humanly understandable. Without the presence of a lawyer, I underwent my first interview, in which they wanted me to confess at all costs, and asked many questions. After several hours of this, they told me the man who attacked me was a policeman and that he was dead. At that point, I decided to answer their questions, even without having spoken to a lawyer. I told them the story of everything. Okay. Because they needed to hear the truth. They let me call my mother and ask if I had an Italian attorney, which I did not. Then grabbed the phone from my hands before I could even tell her I love her. They gave me a public defender who tried to be helpful, but only knew a few words of English. During the official interrogation, I was not asked many details. I told the truth of what had happened, but I realized that nobody believed me, and I don't understand why. I didn't understand why.
E non capivo perché.
After a few days, the new lawyers came to see me, and again I told them the truth of everything that happened. I immediately asked them if it was possible to check the cameras in the area, since those would have captured the scene. A friend of my family, Craig Peters, before coming with my dad to visit me in prison, had been on the scene with my lawyers and saw that there was a surveillance camera on the bank wall pointed towards the
Sul
pharmacy.
muro della banca.
So I was hoping that everything had been filmed. For this reason, with the help of my lawyers, I immediately wrote and personally signed a request to the prosecutor to check all the security cameras in the area. My lawyers warned me that if I was lying, it would be very serious, but I insisted. I knew I was telling the truth and was confident that the video would clarify everything, especially the fact that those men directly attacked us without having announced or identified themselves as police. At one point in the investigation, my lawyers told me the investigations had been concluded, but they still didn't have access to the documents.
Ma ancora non avevano accesso ai documenti.
However, the newspapers had published the conversations I'd had with my family in prison. The news was saying that I said I saw the police badges, and that I perfectly understood that those two men were police officers. I remember that in the police report which my lawyers read me in prison, it was stated that the interceptions were absolutely credible, and that I was a liar. At first, my lawyers thought I was lying to them too, and were very angry. But I told them that I never said anything different, and that those recordings must be fake. I later learned, thanks to my family and my lawyer, that an interpreter had been hired to translate the recordings, and many sentences were completely wrong, and some parts were missing. I heard explanations were requested regarding the photos on my phone. I can understand how extreme they are, even if they have nothing to do with what happened. I remember the colonel described one of me playing with a knife between my fingers. The photo with the knife and my girlfriend was obviously a joke. Stupid and in bad taste, but a joke. Those of guns, some were fake, and any others were of friends.
Those of guns.
Those are photos of guns.
Le photos of guns. Those of guns. Those of guns.
Photos.
Those photos.
Photos.
Ah, ok.
Sì.
Sì.
Yeah,
Quindi
that's what I said.
il senso è
Those
che
photos of guns, some guns were fake,
Yes.
and others were of friends, because in California, guns are legal. So this is the story as I've lived it. I apologize for the length, and thank you all for your time.
Grazie.
Grazie.
Siccome ha letto, lei l'ha tradotto uno scritto in lingua inglese, vorrei l'originale in lingua in questo caso, perché se c'è un problema per la
What's the
traduzione.
original?
Hai firmato?
Yeah.
Did you sign it? Also in all the pages?
Yeah. I didn't have a lot of paper when I wrote it.
Sto mettendo in ordine, Presidente.
Sì, sì, prego. Di cui ha dato lettura